Welcome back to the Typecast. We are really excited for today's conversation.
We're going to talk about clients. We're going to talk about green flags.
We're going to talk about what defines success, how to define your own success, and all the pivots that you're going to take as a business owner. It's a great conversation, so stay tuned. So let's start by having you introduce yourself and your studio.
Okay. My name is Michu Benaim Steiner. I am the head of In-House International. We are a studio/agency, and we can talk about that definition later.
Yes.
We're specializing in branding and brand strategy and animation, and we even do type design for both clients and for mass market. But in essence, we like to say that we work with our clients to help them and their brands become themselves and be understood in the world. And so that is who we are.
We've been
themselves.
Yeah. So we started in 2011 as a remote studio for the first 8 or so years of the studio, well, maybe more. For the first 9 or so years of the studio, that was a very peculiar thing to be. And then the pandemic struck, and then they were like, yeah, you can do this. So like we went from being like this insane little odd studio that lived on screens to being like one of every studio in the world. So that was really fun for no one. For no one, that was really fun, but that was really interesting for us to watch.
It sounded like from our past conversation, and I didn't realize it was tied to the pandemic, but the pandemic specifically caused a major shift in your business.
I think for many, but in a very unexpected way. Would you like me to tell you about it?
Yes, I want to know all about it. Yes.
Okay. So the studio didn't actually start as a studio. It started as a magazine, and I should have probably grabbed them, but there's a couple of spines right there. There's a big book and then 2 small books. Those 2 small books were the magazine that was the studio before it was a studio. And that magazine came out of the financial collapse of '08. And basically from then on out, I think the trend between me and the other 2 co-founders of the studio has been that anytime there is like a lot of turmoil and nerves, we just like how like octopusi, how they just ink things. We just make up completely impractical things to do for business and then turn them into a real thing. That's like our nervous tick. And so
I love it.
The pandemic hit and we were like, oh God, how do we know that we are alive? Let's make a Type Foundry. And that's what we did.
Wow. So there's been some evolution. And before we dive more into that, can you just talk about how you said there's 3 of you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about how the 3 of you met and decided, besides the like turmoil you were facing? Were you college roommates? What started you working together? Because Katie and I started working together through the internet. We hadn't met until we were like 2 years into working together.
She slid into my DMs.
Wait, as one does.
I want to hear that. Like, how did
as one does?
You. Exactly.
This one's about you. So tell us about how you.
Oh man, but you're gonna have to tell me later.
I would love to.
Okay, great. Were you? No, you weren't roommates. Were you roommates on the internet?
Yeah, pretty much. We're definitely work wives. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay, so the magazine that then became the studio was the second magazine that we all worked on together. The first one, I was in college. There was this magazine in Venezuela called Plátano Verde. It was like seminal and about emerging talents. And that one came out of a crisis also. I had no idea, like nothing to do with the founding of that, but there was a general strike and then some cool kids got together and put together that magazine. And that was Alex and Lope were working on that together along with the other editors of the magazine and a couple of other designers. That's how they met. And I was in college. I was in Chapel Hill. I'm also from Venezuela. And I had a zine in college, and this magazine in Venezuela had this flip book feature, which in '03 was the fanciest thing I could imagine. Yes. And I was desperate to put my zine in the flip book. As part of that process, I got in touch with them to see if I could write for them and or steal their code. They were like, absolutely no on the code. Also, we're not really interested in Chapel Hill. But then I wrote them again when I went to an exchange program in London, and that's when I became a contributor. And then Lope and I became great friends and eventually started our own magazine with Alex. And that's how we all met, in editorial land, in the world of words. And they just slowly pulled me from magazines to the design part of life.
And now you find this common theme of a lot of the passion projects and a lot of the fulfilling projects have come out of these really insane messy times. I think that's really oddly beautiful in a way.
Yeah.
How
Really
was
cool.
running a magazine?
Oh man, it's incredibly fun, but it turns out that it's like a hobby for millionaires, and it's super great. Like you get to come up with themes, and it is really like a key to talking to anyone. As well, I guess it might not be super dissimilar to having a podcast or a media outlet. It's just you get to feed your curiosity for a reason. However, selling ads, it was hard then. Imagine now. And I just had graduated college with a philosophy degree, which is super lucrative stuff. So
That's a pretty big shift from philosophy to running a design studio or agency. It's a wild ride.
It's a wild ride, but I think like the other day, someone also made that comment, and I was just like, as a philosophy student, I worked in journalism, and I worked at a newspaper and then was a contributor for this magazine. And then I edited a magazine myself. And so I worked in the world of questions. And then the studio started, and it really is not dissimilar. You're just asking questions and trying to, on the one side, research, on the other side, kind of assess what the needs are. And in the middle of all of that, I got a business degree because remember the hobby for millionaires? I was like, well, then I just need to become a millionaire, obviously.
Okay.
But that didn't quite work out. However, I have the studio now and know how to ask business questions as well. I think that's it. I'm in the business of questions.
I love that. I love that approach to it. So you've shifted a lot with your business. I mean, even in your personal journey, you've started as this one field, went back to school. Where's your studio now? And what are the biggest shifts? Because you've had the Type Foundry, you've had the magazine, you're doing client work, and you've also grown and scaled back your business. So let's talk about some of those shifts. What's the most significant one? And also, where are you now?
I think the continuity of shifts is the biggest sort of practice that we have. It's not that every year we know what's coming the next year, but over time, we've been slowly shifting from like, okay, someone needed some collateral for an arts event and kind of cutting our teeth that way, or branding a pizza joint, or that kind of project where it's like whatever you want, to how does this make sense for your business and for your market, to basically coming in and building not just the expression of the brand, but the brand kind of story, the strategy, what the channels will be, and helping that entire communicational piece go out. Because ultimately, you can have the best product in the world, but if nobody knows about it, if nobody really connects with it, it doesn't do as well as it should. So that kind of like deepening our engagements as a design studio and really putting a lot more of the invisible but really strategic work behind it has been the biggest sort of long-term shift. But the other biggest shift has been stopping. It's very tempting to follow really lucrative parts of creative business. And for us, that was like, well, at one point we were contacted by this organization and they needed a website. And then that website also needed an app component. And as one does, you're like, yeah, we'll make an app with that, like the 17 octave lie, right? Like when you're lying, you're like, yeah, of course.
17 octaves.
Yeah.
You're just like audible to dogs only.
Absolutely.
So we made, with much difficulty, like someone was kind of a crazy developer who also was like, okay, sure, I'll help you out. And you could put one more zero behind budgets than we ever had. And that was pretty exciting because we're like, well, I mean, if this is the kind of budget we would manage, then we have a lot more freedom to do bigger and more exciting and better. But it turned out that building apps, designing them and creating the rationale for them and working on kind of the initial vision and how people, but maintaining them, doing all the sort of technical maintenance also ends up falling to the firm, to the studio, to the agency. And for us, that started to mean that we were spending more and more of our time doing bug reports and maintenance and updates to apps. And the question asking part of and the creative part of the business just started to shrink. And if you showed this to to like a financial firm, they're like, you are doing great. Your trajectory is up and to the right. And all three of us who co-founded the studio were like, we're very unhappy. This is not fun at all. This is becoming more and more of a job. So we started scaling back on that and saying no to projects, which was terrifying. And little by little, finding people to shift the applications to that they could take it with them. Basically, giving someone else, another agency, like the whole thing. It's like, it's yours now.
That must have been really scary.
And it is. I mean, it was lovely to be able to just hand that to someone who actually wanted it. But of course, you're thinking, well, now we've become a little bit known for this. And if we get more referrals in this sphere, we're going to have to say no and build a whole new reputation.
Right. So how did you shift and compensate for that big change of saying no to these projects that were paying the bills?
That's funny. So I grew up in Venezuela, as did the two other founders of the company. And we saw like some very significant devaluations to the currency. And so we knew what this universe of feast or famine looks like. And I think not even by design, we were like, okay, well, when things are good, we have to have the self-control to not just spend it all, but rather like be able to sustain ourselves through transitional periods. And because we know that we decided not to take retainer work at all, or almost at all, very, very rarely do we. And if we do take retainer work, it's very much for like a reason and for a set period. Having that sort of emergency fund was already set. We didn't have one for forever, but enough to get us through to the next set of clients. And the other thing is just having a small studio and keeping the overhead really tight. Last year, we sat down with our accountant, with our bookkeeping team, and they were like, do you know you spend 95% of your expenditures are just on people, not on machines, not on travel, not on... I'm like, that surprised me in no way whatsoever. That is the business. Of course, we'll spend it all on people.
Yeah. We have a very similar financial layout. We just looking at the contractor kind of side of things, we're like, whoa, yeah, love it.
Wow. Yeah.
That's what we are really passionate about doing, is supporting artists in the community as well. So, I mean, it makes sense that it shows up like that.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of value in having a lean business. And I think it's really easy to say, we're going to delegate this, we're going to outsource this, we're going to hire this person to do this, we're going to do this and this and this and this and this. And at the end of the day, those expenses really add up. And if you're trying to build a lean business and you're being financially conscious in that sense, not that you have to do it all alone, but there are options for how you spend that. And so there are things that Katie and I can only do. And there are things that only an accountant can do, right? But then the rest of it, we can decide, do we want to send this project as a referral to someone? Or do we want to put our time in to work on this project? Or is it worth just upping our prices and pouring more energy into this other project? And that's something we're constantly evaluating with not only our prices outwardly facing, but what we're charging people who we do work for, whether we're creating content for someone or we're being asked to do a lettering piece or whatever that may be. We're constantly, especially with each other, checking in and saying, should I charge more because I'm actually going to end up doing this? Or should I bring the price down and say, this is all that's included? And you change the scope and you change the price based on this sliding scale. And I think there's so much value in running a lean business, and it can be really easy to get caught up in this idea of bigger is better. Yeah. And those expenses really do add up over time. And so I love this idea that you've decided what success looks like for you. And you've all had that discussion together, but then you've said, we're going to go against what we've been taught. I'm sure, especially as an MBA, when you went and got your MBA, we're actually going to run a really lean business and it's going to be really profitable and be what we need, but we're going to say no to things. And that can be the scariest first step.
Totally. I'm really curious, like, how do you, I mean, it sounds like you jointly decide, but do you have a sense of like, what is an irresistible project to y'all so that you'll always find a way to make that kind of thing work, or at least try? Do you have a system that you might recommend to people for, of course, insert the factors that are important to you, or what delights you, or what fits into your rubric of success? Or, how do you do it?
That's a really good question. And I'm very thankful that Katie and I have each other to run this off. And it's definitely case by case because I see more and more that some of the clients that would be like dream client lists and who you expect to have the big budgets are the tiniest budgets and the worst terms. And when
funny
people,
how that works.
Yeah, it's really interesting. When people ask us, I just had someone with a lot of clout tell me, I just got this dream inquiry, but they are literally offering me 1/10 of what I want. And I was like, well, sounds like your gut immediately told you this wasn't right. You weren't being valued and you're valuing the company so high. And they took the job and they were like, I don't care. They were like, I'm going to do it. I don't care how much they pay me. I want to say I did this project. And I was like, great, that's what you need to do. But it is such a case by case thing because the things I would have said yes to 10 years ago, I would probably laugh at now. I'd be like, no way. So I think it's really such a personal question. And Katie and I definitely run this by each other every time. And I think we pretty much on every project try and negotiate and say, hey, I could actually do this, but here's what my pricing would be. And I do think when we say, here's what I would charge, even if it's like 10 times more than they're offering, it does help explain our value when we come in with a number and say, just so you know, this is what I would have charged. Are you able to meet me somewhere? I don't care if they're laughing. I don't care if it's not within their budget. It's sometimes just helpful to put it out there and maybe it'll help next time because sometimes people just don't know. I don't know what my dream project would be.
Green flag for sure.
Ooh, share it.
Is when for design projects, when somebody sends me over a mood board that has
With
my
your
work all over it. Because then I know they actually want me and my vision and they'll let me have more creative freedom because that's what they want to hire me for. And if I get a mood board or no mood board and some language that is confusing, or if I get a mood board that has somebody else's work, especially if it's only their work and it's a different artist, then I'm like, why don't you go ahead and hire this person? Like, just go hire them. So I'll send them off. But if it's got my work on it and if they have looked at my stuff, because you'd be surprised the amount of inquiries, you get that you can tell they've never taken a perusal on your website, not even for 1 second.
We get that.
Those are my green flags. Give me a mood board with my work, and you've
that's
won
such
my
a good
heart.
one. Yeah, you've done the research.
That's the kind of the dark side of SEO, right? Where someone was like, designer Austin, or and then you get an email and you're like, did you even click on the link? No.
Yeah. It really takes me back to the days where someone is like, when your cousin is like, so you're in graphic design. I
do a tattoo for me.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, oh gosh, how do I start? And you don't have the tools when you're that fresh to be like, oh, I'm a graphic designer, not a tattoo artist. And like, let me explain the difference to you. And tattoo art is a whole other art form. And so that's a green flag. That's a really good one, Katie. I think another thing, and this kind of goes back to what you said about valuing just you're a professional like question asker, is we're here to tell stories and we're here to help people communicate better and we're here to bring people through an experience. And so I don't need the biggest client. Everyone's ego wants to work for X, Y, and Z because it would look really cool and sound really cool. But I actually just want the client, like Katie said, who's going to be like, oh, wow, we just fell in love with your work. We found it. Here's some pieces we love. Could you do something like this for us? And they can see past the weeds and they can see past what the internet is telling them. And they can just see that you have a gift that they are really attracted to and they want it applied to their story. And I think that that's much more important. And I think that's something that you discovered in your work as well, because you were able to make that shift from wanting the bigger and bigger budgets and bigger clients to saying, we just want to do our job really well. And all that matters is that we have the right partners to do it with. It doesn't matter how big they are. It just matters that it works within our needs so you can really deliver. So
and another case for the smaller clients is that they don't have all that bureaucracy of approval process that the bigger clients that sound so exciting to have on your resume, it can be so difficult to get a concept past 5 different tiers of people that have to sign off on it. And your vision can really get truncated and it can evolve in a way that is not to your liking. Whereas with smaller clients, you usually work directly with the decision maker, a couple people, and I much prefer that.
I'll say what one of my green flags is, and it goes very much from a completely different direction, where it's like, it's not necessarily that the client knows everything about us, because like as a studio, we've actively avoided having a recognizable style in the client work we deliver, because of course every brand has to be in their own voice, but rather that they know why they want to do the project, what the value is to the business. And when they come to you, they're like, look, we are shifting from A to B, or we are adding this new product or service, and we need to reach an entirely new audience. This to us is worth a lot. We value this greatly, and this is a priority for us to launch this product how it's supposed to be, or to reintroduce ourselves as a museum, as a company, as an organization to the community of consumers or audiences in the appropriate way so that they can come with us to the future. If they are able to articulate why this project is valuable to them, then you are already inherently a valuable partner. And that always feels really, I'm like, you know why you're doing what you're doing? It means that the people who need to make decisions are already going to be making this a priority.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how, like, working with bigger clients, it's not like the workaround, but it is a way to know whether this massive feeling project with a massive feeling company is going to get the attention it needs to not get watered down.
I think that's a really good way to describe it, getting watered down.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
We've
like
all seen
it,
that happen.
but it's a really good way to describe it. So how would you define a successful relationship now? You're kind of touching on it already, but at the end of the day, when a project goes well, what can you pinpoint that you're like, that worked well because of X, Y, and Z? Is there anything specific, like not just the green flags, but at the end of the day, when the project is done, what makes you, since you're not going on the kind of surface level, oh, they were a big brand, they paid us well, what things make it feel successful to you?
Yeah. If throughout the process we were able to cultivate and retain trust, that's huge, because the symptoms of that are visible in the end product. You can see that, well, not only did the work not get as diluted, but the leadership of the organization or company knows why certain decisions were made. You have people who are willing to defend, for example, the brand or the design. And ultimately, I feel like a very successful project that is built on trust, where it doesn't become adversarial or like, oh, you know, this design firm is trying to bamboozle us into putting more colors into our brand expression. It ends up, you know, and you can see it where people in the company feel proud to either wear or talk about or show off what they're associated with. I think that's a very successful partnership with a client. And oftentimes the most successful partnerships, and this is why we don't do retainers, at those points they're like, well, will you stay on? And we would like to continue. And the reason we don't is because the responsibility in the brand process is brutally honest. We have a kind of an agreement of how we're going to work together, planted into every proposal, every capabilities meeting, every intro, where it's like we make brands fungible to other people so that the audiences that you care about know about you in a way that speaks to them. What that means is, like, if you personally love it, I do not care. That matters to me zero. It also does not matter if I personally love it, unless it's for like designers who like are me. I am
The market is me.
I am irrelevant. This is irrelevant. If you like it, if your cousin who is a designer likes it, if I like it, that doesn't matter. If we're making a wedding invitation, it matters. Otherwise, it does not matter.
I think that's a really hard concept for some people to understand, is that when you are truly serving a client, you are serving what they need and what story they need told, and it's not about it looking pretty. And I think this comes partly from being fresh, not understanding the core of the strategy involved, and you called that the invisible work. It's the really hard work that nobody sees how long it took or how you got there. Or you see like the new Pepsi rebrand where there's 8,000 pages of a grid that nobody understands. And it's like, I don't know. Most people are looking at it and they're like, it's just a type. It's like letters. I don't get it. But to a designer, they obviously felt it was compelling enough to go through this whole process of a grid and what it meant. And so to actually just serve your customer and your client and say, it doesn't matter if we like it. What matters is that it's reaching your audience and telling what you're trying to express is a pretty big step to take. I wonder how you navigate doing that with there's 3 of you as co-owners. And then if you're working with any contractors or employees, and then all the people on the team that you're working with, how do you navigate all those different voices having opinions?
Well, I think it is a matter of like, okay, we have to have, and to bring the client in, it's not like we don't care what you like. We're going to do whatever we think is right. It's very much like we will test things. We will look at how audiences are interpreting certain things. We'll look at your competition and your industry, but also like things that people think of as substitutes or who is doing something well in the kind of tone that you should be taking, but in a completely different industry. How do all the pieces come together? But ultimately, it comes down to this. What is the goal you're trying to achieve? And how do you need people to interpret who you are and to feel about you to get to that goal? And if we're all going in that direction, just like that's where the destination is, every design, every opinion kind of gets filtered through that. But one of the very, very important things to make sure you show early on is that when your own proposal or when your own thinking doesn't align, to be the first one to be like, nope, actually that doesn't work. So it's not like, oh, this is just a trick to get what we want.
Yeah, keeping that mission right at the forefront is really important, and reminding everyone and reminding yourself when you're designing, sure, this looks cool, but actually I don't think it works with the mission. And you can't do that unless your mission is really strong.
Exactly.
When you do have things that are kind of going off the rails and while you started with a direction and everybody on the same page, inevitably some people fall off and it starts to be a little chaotic. Do you have any strategies for how to get it back on track?
Katie, this sounds like you've got a personal experience.
I saw this a lot
does, no?
in my
Don't you think?
when I was an art director all the time, because we were just working with a lot more cooks in the kitchen, and it was always interesting to see how my creative director and the producer kind of handled it, and it was different for every situation. But I'm curious how you kind of get everybody back together and put the train back on that track.
Choo choo.
Yeah, truly. Choo-choo. I mean, I think that could be just like a whole
masterclass in its own.
I feel like that could be a whole series, and I don't know that I'm like of the ambition to have a podcast, but I feel someone should do it. I'm just going to put it out there in the universe, like re-railing.
Yeah.
That sounds super gross. Putting everyone back on track. Here's a few practices. One is that we just discovered very early on that, and this is why we don't necessarily do retainers, that we need to be able to say the hard things and to keep everyone on track. And sometimes that's just not, is being less flexible than people would prefer you to be. But they know that from the beginning, right? That we are going to keep our timelines and we are going to expect you to give us answers or decisions or your thinking or your notes by this date. And so making very clear that we will deliver everything exactly what we said, exactly on time, but we expect you to do the same and we will hound you to get that done. Everybody wants to hire someone who will hound you. That it is understood that it is a collaboration and not just me bringing you beautiful things that you can then sort of react joyfully to for your own pleasure. And the other thing is that we insist on managing every project, that it's like, don't you worry, we'll take the timeline. We'll like make the reports. We'll schedule all the meetings ahead of time. Yeah. And those meetings we will run, every single one of them. And that way it's very turnkey and you can sort of put your trust in that this process will run. And that way, if things are starting to go off the rails, we're the first to know. That doesn't mean that it doesn't still occasionally go off the rails. And so in looking for like, hey, have I ever made any notes that I might be able to add to this? I ended up finding this kind of, it's not a template, but it's like a series of slides that I called like a client come to Jesus deck.
That's amazing.
Where it's like, okay, something is off. We talk about something we decided, and then you come back and have like you're like, I had a dream last night, and that dream led me
I showed my wife.
I'm like, great. Like,
heard that.
For me, it's always a cousin. Like, it's always a cousin. I'm just like, this designer cousin I feel like it's like Canadian girlfriend of designers. The creature that doesn't exist, but it's there to be like my cousin is a designer, and they said that they don't like the color turquoise.
Yes. It's always purple.
You should hire them.
Everybody
hire
hates
your
purple.
cousin.
I'm like, I'm so glad you have a cousin on your corner, but would you like to work with them instead?
People are going to love it or hate it no matter what, whether they know the story or not. It's just, okay, well, they weren't sitting in on the meeting and they weren't told why we went with purple. Okay? Back off, cousin.
Yeah. And sometimes, like, I know that this sort of figure of the external because on occasion, like a friend of yours or a friend of mine who works in, say, marketing or in operations will be like, we're working on this thing. Would you tell me what you're thinking about this work in progress that somebody else did? And I'll basically always say no. I'm like, I don't have the context. I'm not in the project. And I am in no position to have an opinion about this.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is a kind of solidarity.
Very much so. Designer solidarity.
Yeah.
The other thing that is, I think, maybe designer solidarity that you all talked about a little earlier that I think, honestly, I don't know if this should be a movement or what, but those sexy clients that underpay all designers and like one by one, we're all finding out. And I'm like, but everybody knew.
Yeah.
Why doesn't anyone say?
Yeah. We're not in the business of shaming.
No.
But
it's also like, it's also just because you're a sexy brand, why do you feel like you can take advantage?
I think something that this recently came up for us, and we really went back and forth on, do we need to educate this potential collaborator client on what would be fair practice and what would be a courtesy to do to people in this industry? And sometimes it's not worth it, and sometimes it's really worth it. And so that's
sometimes
one of the
you just
reasons,
have to say it because it's worth it to you.
Yeah, right. Sometimes you're like, I just have to say it. Oh my God.
Yeah. But this is my principle.
That's why I think it's always also a good idea to like negotiate, or something that I think a lot of fresh designers don't quite grasp because nobody teaches us is that we have to educate other people on our value. Right. So like if you're working with someone who has never hired an agency or who has never worked with a designer, they think that design is just pretty font pairings. It's our job to educate them on why it's so important and what a brand story can do and what strategy is involved, because they don't know, right? Like I can't go to an engineer's office and understand why they would charge what they charge because I have absolutely no idea what any of it is, right?
And that adds that trust piece as well. When you show that authority and you show that confidence and you're like, hey, I'm going to lead this. I'm going to show you how this works. They're going to be a lot more willing to listen to you. As a young designer freelancer, when I first started out, I was terrified of taking that confident leadership role. And I didn't feel like I was allowed to. I felt like, okay, when's my boss going to come in and handle this for me? If I could go back and talk to my younger self, that's something that I would have told her. Even if it's fake it till you make it, I think you just do establish a better relationship with your client when you have that confidence, even if you don't feel it inside, if you're exuding it, even if behind your emails, if you're exuding it and saying, this is the timeline and this is how this works and this is when I'm going to send you the invoices, then that's just going to set things up so much better.
Right. And it's tough too because nobody has taught us those things, right? We haven't, like, when you're a junior designer, you don't see what your boss is sending as an email oftentimes. So you don't know that they're behind the scenes or that the project manager is doing something. And in school, if you go to traditional design school, they're not going to tell you how to explain the importance of branding to someone else. They're just going to like drill it into your brain for so long that it's muddled and you just think you're good at it. I don't know.
We did occasionally have to do a little presentation in front of the class.
Yes,
but that was as far as it really went.
Right. But it was like to your peers who knew the context of what design means. And anyway, we could go real deep into the
and
story
truly
design.
thought that it was really valuable already. But I think that is the third designer solidarity thing, because I will always try to go and say, like, even if you, because many a time you might get an email saying, it was such an interesting conversation. We read your proposal and it was very detailed and exactly to what the goal is. But like 2 other people who are independent undercut you by like a third or 2/3. And I'm like, if that is the pricing that works for them, but here is what the value we bring to you is. And not because it's us, but because maybe next time you hire someone, you'll look at their value a little differently. I don't always kind of turn the business around. I don't even often turn that business around, because oftentimes cost gets put above all else. But if they are in the position to hire designers in the future, then maybe they'll be a little softer on thinking what the fair price is. And if there are no competitors, but they did not expect to spend that much, the next person that comes along has a little bit of an advantage that you sort of planted there for them. And that, I'm sure someone did it for me, for clients who were already bought in. And so that's part of the job.
Love that. Solidarity. So to wrap up, Katie, what do you think? Should we do some rapid fire or should we do just an advice question?
Do a couple quick fun ones.
We need a name for this segment. So we're now accepting applications for it. But we're going to
Okay.
do like a rapid fire normal person question, like not just like funny things. First one, is there a design trend that you just really don't like? You can't get on board?
Oh man, I'm terrible at these sorts of things. Like later, I'll be like, I have these 17 ones that I have been talking about nonstop. But I think the thing is, whenever everybody's going in one direction, the idea of the bandwagon already sort of drives me crazy.
Okay. So basically every trend.
All the trends.
All trends.
Trends in
All
general.
trends are
How do you like your pizza? I feel like pizza is really big in the design space. How do you like
Yes.
yours?
I like my pizza.
Any pizza.
I like
What
pizza,
toppings?
yes. I like mushrooms, olives, spinach.
Mm.
And people keep trying to get me to try pineapple, and I'm sure I will.
Mm. Okay.
Are
I
you
mean,
pineapple people?
Sure.
Yes?
I'll pretty much eat
Sure.
pizza in any form. Yeah.
People normally say it's polarizing, but I'm honestly as sure as well. I don't feel polarized. I feel
I don't either.
right in the middle about
I'll-
pineapple.
I'll take it. If you're handing me a hot, fresh pizza, I'm going to take
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Even though I'm gluten free and
As
I'm going
long
to get a
as
stomach
it's
ache,
not
I'm going to take it.
juicing everywhere. I don't want it to be a juicy
Gross.
pizza.
Gross. Okay. How about what's your favorite podcast right now? I mean, this is not a plug for us, genuinely, because
I
we
mean,
like
this
listening to them.
podcast, obviously. I enjoy a few. I think my mainstay generally, which is just so, I feel like I'm such a boring person for saying this, but I really love 99% Invisible. Also, the solemn voice of Roman Mars is always a plus. But yeah, I don't know.
That's
There's
great.
a few and I'll think about them later, but let's go with that
Of course
one.
you will. Okay.
That's great.
Yeah.
And then last thing, what are two, just look around you, what are two things that don't have to be design related at all that you're just obsessed with right now? Two things, maybe recently you finished a book, maybe a new product that you bought. What are two things that you're just loving right now that are helping you get through the day? Maybe a new water bottle. I mean, that's always a good one for me.
I mean, this is not even like that new, but my sister, my youngest sister, and I'll give her a shout out for this. She knew I had to drink more water, mostly because everybody needs to drink more water.
Yeah.
And she like told me that I needed to get a water bottle with a straw so that I didn't
Yeah.
have to like use both my hands. And I thought that was like sippy cup embarrassing stuff, but it
Nope.
turned out that I'm drinking a lot more water. So to water bottles with straws, the sippy
So
cup
you
of adults.
free one hand.
I'm strawless.
Yeah, no,
But
see this
I
like
don't need two hands though. I still
well, but then there's movement and like I don't know. I'm like as little see, she knows.
it's more graceful. I have to like throw it back a little bit.
Yeah. The other day I did see a girl at the gym drinking from a straw water bottle, but she was throwing it back. And I was like, that's not how
yeah.
I would
She
drink out
doesn't
of
know
that.
how to water bottle.
She doesn't know how to water
Well, it's
bottle.
good to know. Everyone go out and get your straw.
And the other
tumblers.
thing, I'm like very big on smellies. So
Smellies?
yeah, things with scent.
Please.
We'll
I
call them
smellies.
smellies.
That's
Yeah,
a
I
new
mean,
brand. Somebody started
sure,
that brand. It's just
smellies.
things that smell. Smellies.
Things that smells. Yeah, you heard it here first. I'm sure someone calls it that. I didn't
Probably.
I didn't just make up that term, I don't think. But There's really nice candles. There's one called Cannabis by Malin and Goetz. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. That is kind of stupid
it smell
expensive,
like
but
cannabis?
smells so good. No, it does not. It smells like
So the name is off, but it smells good.
the name is because cannabis doesn't exactly smell spectacular.
That's what I was thinking.
No, this is like
little
musky,
skunky.
yeah, it is a little skunky, but not in a marijuana
Like
way.
a fresh way.
Everybody go buy this Smellies candle. It
Yeah, and
smells
just like watch the hate roll and be like, this is way too funky and smells like, I don't know. Like
scent
funk.
is very personal. I feel like
Yeah,
something that
yeah.
smells good to me will smell disgusting to someone else and vice versa.
Mm.
I feel like we got to end it there because I feel like the talk of how smells affect other different people is just one that we probably don't want to go down.
No? I mean, I'm down, but I see that we're at time. So what is your favorite candle? And we'll just, so that I don't feel like I said something quite as embarrassing.
You know what? I don't have a favorite candle, but back in the day, I used to go to the mall and go to the Body Shop. Do you both remember the Body Shop?
Yeah.
Not Bath and Body Works.
Yes.
The Body Shop. We don't have one anymore. And I used to get this scent Satsuma, and like we don't sell those in the
My
grocery store
husband's
here.
mom is all over it.
All over that Satsuma.
We get that kind of stuff for Christmas.
Yeah, well,
Satsuma.
I hadn't had it in so long, and I like felt a wave of nostalgia because we do not have a store anywhere near us. I like didn't even know the brand still existed. I thought it just shut down. Anyway, the brand is amazing, and I bought an essential oil of Satsuma. I bought the soap, and it took me back 20 years.
You're like Satsuma'd out.
I'm Satsuma'd out. It's delightful. I feel like I could just take a bite out of it. It's great. So that's what I'm into right now. What about you, Katie?
I did a fun branding project for a candle company called Herland Home. Herland Home. Gonna give you a plug, Priscilla. And all her candles smell amazing. And my favorite one is Interstellar. And I have like 20 of them around my house because obviously she gave me all this.
You're like, listen, I need more for research.
Yeah. She sends me one every holiday and I'm just like, yes.
You know what? I think because we have young kids, I like don't have candles going so much. So maybe I'll get back into my candle phase.
It's
because I used to collect those
for your
things
candle era.
Like Beanie Babies. I would collect the ones that like, remember the ones that dripped down onto a recycled bottle and you would make your own art from candle wax?
I do not know of
Whoa,
that.
they were like sold at a kiosk. This is going in such a different direction than I expected.
Love it.
Anyway, this was great. Thank you so much for coming on. Do you want to do a quick
for
plug
having me.
of where everyone can find your work?
Yeah,
Your studio?
absolutely. So our studio is called In-House International. It was an inside joke that kind of went off the rails, but we are inhouse.com for the website, and we are in-house on Insta. Look us up there.
Love it.
Great.
All right. All good things. Thank you so much. We'll talk
Thank
soon.
you.
Thanks for your wisdom.
And for yours. Have a good one.
If you loved this conversation and you want to hear more stories like this and what you can learn from them, you want to join the Good Guild. The Good Guild is our monthly membership where every month you'll get workshops, Q&As, fireside chats, and accountability, which is so important when you're building a business. We cover everything from business basics to type design and everything in between. So if you want to check it out, check out goodtype.us/guild.